Your Creative Push, Episode 36.
I mean, you cannot write anything any way but one word at a time. That's it.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Diana Gabaldon. Diana is the author of the award-winning #1 New York Times bestselling OUTLANDER novels. Diana has written 8 books in the series with more than 26 million copies in print worldwide. The series is published in 26 countries and 23 languages. It includes a nonfiction companion volume, The Outlandish Companion, which provides details on the settings, background, characters, research, and writing of the first novels of the series. She has also written a graphic novel titled The Exile. Diana's current writing projects include the 9th major novel in the Outlander series, as yet untitled, and the 2nd volume of The Outlandish Companion. She is also serving as co-producer and advisor for the Outlander TV series, produced by the Starz Network and Tall Ship Productions, which is, of course, based on her novels. Diana, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I just wanted to start out by asking you, could you take us back and tell us the story of when you first got the idea to write Outlander and kind of that process of getting started?
Well, I can, yes. That's probably much messier than you expect. For one thing, I didn't get the idea to write Outlander, as it were. I just wanted to write a book in order to learn how, because I had realized from about the age of 8 that I was meant to be a novelist. I just didn't know how. And I came from a very conservative family background. My father would say to me, well, you're such a poor judge of character. You're going to marry some bum. So be sure to get a good education so you can support your family. So, what was going on at home. I thought perhaps I wouldn't announce I wanted to write books for a living because I understood this to be financially iffy. And instead I went into science. I have a PhD and a few other degrees in the biological sciences. And I was a university professor at Arizona State University for about 12 years, I think. But anyway, I liked science. I was good at it, but I knew I was supposed to be a novelist. And when I turned 35, I thought to myself, well, Mozart was dead at 36. I think you better get a move on here. And so I said, all right, on my next birthday, I will start writing a novel just to learn how, to see what this involves. Because up to this date, I had written a lot of stuff, all the stuff you get in the course of an academic career, scholarly articles, grant proposals, popular science papers, you name it. And I had sort of slid sideways into being an accidental expert in scientific computation, which meant that I wrote freelance for the computer press as well. So, software reviews, tutorials, documentation, textbooks. So, I wrote all the time, but not novels. And so I was not afraid of the written word, and I had great confidence in my ability, to communicate. I knew what grammar, punctuation, etc. were. But it's a far cry from a software review to a novel.
Sure.
And so I said, well, okay, I think the only way to learn to write a novel is to actually write a novel. And I need to learn what goes into it in terms of, more of the mental aspect, in terms of daily discipline and, mental commitment, maybe organization of research, whatever. What are the details? How does this work, And so I said, okay, you're going to write a novel for practice. I'm going to show it to anyone. I'm not telling anyone what I'm doing. This is just for me to learn how. So the next question, of course, was, well, what kind of novel are you going to write? And so I thought about it for a while because I read everything and lots of it. Anything would hopefully have done. But I thought for a while and I said, well, for me, maybe historical fiction, because I was a research professor, even in the sciences. I knew my way around the library. And I said, it seems easier to look things up than it does to make them up. And if I turn out to have an imagination, I can steal things from the historical record, which actually works pretty well. And so I said, fine, historical novel, where shall I set this? Because I've got no particular background in history. Any time would do as well as another. I need to look it all up anyway. So I was looking, for a time and place in which to set this practice novel. And the only thing I actually knew about writing novels was that they should have conflict. And so I was looking for conflict and thinking, Venice, 15th century, American Civil War, it sounds intriguing. And I happened to see a really old Doctor Who rerun on public television. It was one of the Patrick Troughton episodes. And I'm assuming that most of your clientele may be familiar with Doctor Who, but just in case they're not, the doctor of the title is a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, who travels through space and time having adventures. And along the way, he picks up companions from different periods of Earth's history. In this very old show, which must have been done more than 50 years ago, he had picked up a young Scotsman from 1745, and this was a young man who appeared in his kilt. I said, well, that's kind of fetching. And I found myself still thinking about this the next day. And finally I said, well, what the heck? The important thing is, pick a point, get started. It doesn't really matter where you start. So I said, fine, Scotland, 18th century. And so that's where I began, knowing nothing about Scotland or the 18th century, having no plot, no outline, and no characters, just the rather vague images conjured up by the notion of a man in a kilt. But I set in immediately to do the research and to begin writing immediately as well, because I had run into way too many historical fiction writers whose idea of writing a novel is to spend 10 years doing research and then decide they don't know enough. And I said, well, I'm not falling into that trap. I start writing immediately, but do the research at the same time. So I was working along, just fiddling around with my man in a kilt and doing research in the library, looking for conflict. Well, you don't look for conflict in Scotland in the 18th century for long without running straight into Bonnie Prince Charlie and the Rising of 45. I said, okay, let us find plenty of conflict. Okay, we'll use that. And so I said, well, it looks like Scots versus English. I must have a lot of Scotsmen because of the kilt factor. But I think it would be a good idea if I had a female character to play off these guys. And we'll have sexual tension. That's conflict. That's good. So the third day of writing, I introduced this female. No idea who she was, what she was doing in the plot, how she got there. But I loosed her into a cottage full of Scotsmen to see what she'd do. Okay, so my English woman walks in. All of the Scots are muttering to each other around the fire. They turned around and stared at her. And I was thinking, why? Does she look odd? What's going on here? Anyway, one of them drew himself up, and he said, my name's Dougal Mackenzie, and who might you be? And without stopping to think, I just typed, my name's Claire Elizabeth Beecham, and who the hell are you? And so I said, well, you don't sound at all like a historical person. So I fought with her for several pages, trying to beat her into shape and make her talk like an 18th century woman. But she wasn't having any of this. She just kept making smart-ass modern remarks. And she also took over and started telling the story herself. So I said, okay, I'm not going to fight with you all the way through this book. No one's ever going to see this. It doesn't matter what bizarre thing I do. Go ahead and be modern. I'll figure out how you got there later. So it's all Claire's fault that there's time travel in these books.
I love that idea. What advice would you give to somebody to trust in the character then to tell the story for you?
Well, it depends whether your character is talking to you or not. Essentially, you need to know who your character is. And, to me, characters come under three classifications. They're either mushrooms, onions, or hard nuts. A mushroom is somebody who just pops up out of nowhere, walks off to the scene they're in. I know them immediately. They just talk. I don't have to worry at all about what they say in the situation. I can just hear them, and those are good when they happen. Onions tend to be like the main characters. These are people whose souls I understand immediately. I grasp at once who they actually are in their essence. But the more I work with them, the more layers they develop. They become more rounded and pungent, and so forth. But it's becoming accustomed to the characters, or perceiving a character when they do pop up and talk to you. Now, the hard nuts are the people that I'm kind of stuck with by virtue of it being historical fiction, or by virtue of the plot, or for some other reason. In other words, I cannot write about the specific battle without mentioning George Washington. Okay, George Washington is not one of my characters to create a reasonable fictional simulacrum of him that would, be historically accurate, psychologically honest, and so dramatically satisfying. This is work, but it's not the same thing as working with a fictional character who is a refraction of yourself in one way or another. So I'd say you just live with the characters if they don't speak to you immediately, or if you're not sure what they would do. But bear in mind that the most important thing, what determines the shape of your story, is what does this main character want. If you know that, then you're in a good position to go ahead, because then the story is about what's stopping them from getting what they want. Do they really want this? Are they going to change their mind and want something else if they run into this sort of obstacle? What if they meet this person over here who distracts them from what they think they want? It turns out to be a wrong and then leading them down the wrong path. Maybe they change their mind and go after this, and it's a big success, but then they realize, no, this isn't what I wanted at all. And anyway, things get in their way. But the story is about how they go about trying to get what they want. Maybe they get it in the end, maybe they don't, but that's what the story is about.
Now, Outlander, all the books are such like a massive undertaking, it seems. What would you suggest to somebody who might have this massive idea similar to Outlander, but just massive in scale, and they're afraid to just take that first step because it's such like this big thing to kind of try to accomplish?
Well, I had no idea what Outlander was going to turn out to be when I started writing it. I had in mind, just a regular size slender book. It's just that, things happen as you start. See, people work in different ways. I don't plan books ahead of time. I don't work with an outline. I don't work in a straight line. I work in little pieces where I can see things happening. Okay, this doesn't work for everybody. A lot of people really do need to plan things out and have some idea where they're going. And if you are that sort of person, well, even if you have a massive job planned, it is planned. You sort of have at least a rough blueprint as to where you're going. If you're not that kind of person, I just wouldn't worry about it. Keep working along, a bit at a time and see where it leads you. But, the secret to success in writing really is to understand how your own brain works and work with it rather than against it.
Well, so you're in the middle of your 9th novel now,
Yeah, that's right.
Of the Outlander series.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you ever have days where you're just like it's not coming to me? Like,
oh yeah.
How do you deal with those days?
Oh, everybody has those. Yeah, I call it a cold day.
A cold
you just
day.
have
Yeah,
no
I like
idea. You sit down and you're thinking, well, I know how to write yesterday. I got no clue today. How does this work? Yeah, no, what I have learned over years of doing this, basically the only cure for that or any other form of writer's block is to write anyway, no matter what. You just need to get words on paper and, you keep doing that. And eventually the words will become alive again and start flowing for you. Now, what I usually use just as an icebreaker, so to speak, what I need for any given scene is what I call a kernel, a line of dialogue, a concrete object, an emotional ambiance, anything that I can sense concretely. And then I'll write a line or two about that object, that line of dialogue, whatever, try to make it as clear and concise and brilliant as I can. And I sit there and fiddle with that sentence back and forth, adding clauses, taking things out. And meanwhile, the back of my mind is kicking up questions. What time of day is it? How is the light falling? Is there someone else in the room with me? And very, very gradually, things start to happen on either side of that kernel. I'm thinking, well, okay, how did this get here? Well, I think maybe somebody brought it. Okay, we'll go back, and in the paragraph above this, somebody, the butler opens the door and comes in with a tray holding this object, and everybody gathers around the table while it's set down. Okay, and this gets me back to where my kernel was, but now I know a lot more about it, and there were other people in the room. They were all waiting for this object to be brought in, and now we're all looking at it. Okay, so the next thing that must happen is someone's either going to touch the object or they're going to say something about it. And, since I'm now pretty firmly in this room and visualizing the people who may be there, I can probably see one of them either reach out to touch the object and someone else slaps his hand away and says something, or someone else stands back in awe and is going, oh my God. Anyway, it gradually this will lead me into, the history of the object and why these people are here. So, on a cold day, I just flip through my historical references, of which I have tons, and, pick some sort of interesting object to use as the kernel there. And sometimes the kernel disappears completely in the course of writing. It isn't what the scene is about. It's just a way of getting words on the paper, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, I love that idea of just picking one little piece and then going from there. It's definitely a helpful tactic.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter how big your project either is planned to be or eventually turns out to be. I mean, you cannot write anything any way but one word at a time. That's it.
One word at a time. I love that.
One word at a time. Yeah.
Diana, it's time for our final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone, grab somebody that you've already inspired today by the shoulder, and give them that push into starting with their creative endeavors.
Great. Okay. Well, one thing is don't let yourself be stopped by lack of time. So when you're juggling a full-time job and trying to be creative on the side, there's always this problem. You come home dead tired and you're thinking, oh my God, I don't have the energy, and a day passes and you don't write anything, you don't draw anything, whatever. You can't do that. What you need to do is look for or set aside some time in the day. It doesn't need to be a big amount of time. If you have 10 minutes, that's enough, but it has to be that 10 minutes, sit down and write for 10 minutes. Or sit down and draw for 10 minutes, and, the next day do it again. If you keep doing this 10 minutes every day, eventually you'll have a book. If you don't, you won't.
That's right. It's just putting in the time.
Mm-hmm.
Diana, thank you so much for coming on today and for giving us that push. We really appreciate it, and it's been quite an honor.
Oh, no problem at all. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, come on, how inspiring is that? Thank you, Diana, for that. I'm just so appreciative of her because she agreed to come on the show before the show was even a show, before episode 0 even aired. She just wanted to be able to help somebody. She didn't care what the audience was like or anything. Fortunately, the show has gained traction and does have an audience, but when it was just me, a random dude, sending out emails to writers, artists, photographers, people that I really respected and admired, and saying, hey, do you want to come on this show that I'm thinking about making? She said yes. And her time is very valuable, so the fact that she was willing to make that sacrifice just blew me away. And how about the fact that Outlander was just, a practice novel for her? She was doing it to just figure it out. And in doing so, she created a wildly popular series of books that ended up becoming a show. It should really inspire you to do exactly that, practice. She had no intention for anyone to see Outlander, her, first novel, her practice round. So, you should practice, enjoy your writing and, enjoy your art, enjoy your music, enjoy whatever crazy new idea you have that's stuck in your head, but just put it out there for yourself. Call it practice if you have to. It'll make it much more accessible to you. You're behind closed doors and it's just you and your art and nobody else. And maybe later, if you really end up digging this practice round, you can move forward with it and start sharing it and maybe even start trying to sell it. But for now, it's just practice. It's just you and your art, and it should bring joy to your life. So I really appreciate that lesson from Diana. Just enough time for a few iTunes ratings and reviews shout-outs. Thomas O'Grady, PhD, gave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. He said, very inspiring. Great mixture on a daily basis of news and thoughts with a truly great and inspiring show. Justin Glover said, great show if you need a push. Love this podcast. Definitely good motivation to get your important things done. Doug said, push it now. Creativity is just the start because sometimes we need a good push to execute. This is the show for just that. And Simon W. Chan said, inspiring. Great information and motivation from someone who really does it. Listening to your show has been a great experience. Thanks for sharing and giving your time to spread knowledge. So thank you, everyone, for those 5-star ratings and reviews. You are helping the show tremendously. We're still number 1 in arts, visual arts, and education on iTunes. Kind of blowing me away. I thought it was a fluke at first, but we are just doing so well. It's kind of like an out-of-body experience for me. Not only that the show's doing well, but that so many people are, inspired on a daily basis to get their work done, because I know how hard of a thing it is to do. So I'm really glad that this show is able to help you out. On tomorrow's show, we have artist Nick Gentry.
Yeah, it's sort of like you have to be very attached to the work while you're working on it and be very committed to it. But I learned this process quite early on with my art. It's just a case of being very attached to it, and then when it goes out of my studio, I then have to detach from it. It's not me, it's just something that happened, something that I've touched or been involved with. The key part about the regular practice is that you can move on to the next piece, and then your attention is focused on the next thing, rather than looking back for too long at things you've done a while ago and just worrying whether that's going to have an effect or if people are going to like it or not. It's the key thing is to keep going, because you are going to improve if you keep going.
Nick makes some fascinating work. He uses like floppy disks and VHS tapes and other recycled medias as a canvas to make his art. I just had a really fascinating conversation with him about, technology, time, our kind of humans' place in the world, and all kinds of other geeky stuff that we're both interested in. So, and of course we get into creativity and how to push through. So that's for you tomorrow if you need that push. Hopefully today you were inspired to get your work done, and we will be here for you tomorrow if you need it again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.